This is an R Media podcast.
I was dragged out of the house by my hair. I was in like a simple kind of nightie. I didn't have any underwear on. I didn't have shoes. I didn't have my wallet or ID. The door was slammed. My baby daughter was inside and I couldn't get back in the house. I was just completely terrified. I didn't know if she was alive.
Marie Claire presents You're Gonna Want to Hear This.
If you or someone you know has experienced domestic, family, or sexual violence, please know that support is available. You can call 1-800-RESPECT on 1-800-737-732 or Lifeline on 1311 14. Hello and welcome back to You're Gonna Want to Hear This. I'm your host, Georgie McCourt. I want you to imagine this for a moment. You're 24 years old. You have a 5-month-old baby in your arms. The person who's supposed to love and protect you has become the person that you fear most. You've tried to leave before. So many times you've lost count. But this time you know you have to go. And it's not because you're ready, and it's not because it's easy. It's because staying is no longer safe. What comes next isn't freedom. It's homelessness. It's uncertainty. It's wondering where you're going to sleep and how you're going to feed your child and whether you've made the right decision, even though deep down you know that you had no other choice. The heartbreaking reality is that Nicole Yade's story isn't rare. Before she was the incredible CEO of the Women's and Girls Emergency Centre, before she became one of Australia's most respected advocates for women escaping violence, Nicole was a little girl growing up in a home ruled by fear. She learnt to recognise the sound of her father's keys in the front door and instantly knew what mood he was in. She knew which floorboards creaked, which doors made noise, and how to make herself invisible. As a kid, she begged her mother to leave. As an adult, despite promising herself that she would never repeat the cycle, she found herself in an abusive relationship of her own. And yet today, Nicole has transformed that lived experience into purpose. Every single night, around 200 women and children find safety through the organisation that she leads. She has spent decades standing beside victim survivors, challenging the myths that we continue to believe about domestic violence, and fighting for a system that often fails the women who need it most. In today's conversation, we talk about why leaving is not as simple as people think. We unpack domestic violence and the invisible barriers that keep women trapped. We discuss why, despite domestic violence dominating headlines, frontline services are still overwhelmed. But this isn't just a conversation about violence. It's about survival, it's about resilience, it's about motherhood, hope, and what it really takes to rebuild a life after unimaginable trauma. This is honestly one of the most important conversations that we have had on the podcast, and I was in tears at multiple points, and I'm just so grateful that Nicole has trusted us with her story. This is Nicole Yade, and you are going to want to hear this. Nicole, I want to start with your personal story because it really gives so much context to what you do now and your purpose. You have shared that you grew up in a home shaped by domestic violence. Yeah. Tell me about the decision to share your story publicly.
Yeah, I mean, I think I didn't share my story for a really, really long time. And a lot of people who work in domestic violence, they will have this backstory, but they might not share their story. And it took me a long time to share mine. But I think really what did it for me was working with women who felt like, you know, they had made these decisions and this kind of self-blame around it. So in our work with women, I didn't want them to feel alone. It was, you know, carefully sharing some of my own story for them to understand, like, a lot of us have been there. You know, it isn't just people going through it right now. So many of us who work in domestic violence have had those experiences and we have got through them, and they will too. I feel like that's probably why I decided to share
and
the
it's
story.
so many people who work in this field, it's what drives them. It's their purpose because they know firsthand exactly what these victim survivors are going through.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think part of the tactics of perpetration of violence is around isolation. And anything we can do to stand together in solidarity with each other and reduce that stigma, even though these experiences are heartbreaking and, those experiences for me still impact me until today. But there is a way of living with it and you can get through it. And that's a really important thing for people to know who might be going through it right now.
Yeah, wow. And it just, it speaks. We're going to be talking about later in the conversation how hard it is for women to leave. And it's just, no wonder it's given you such incredible purpose.
Yeah.
You've spoken about the fact that despite promising yourself that you would never enter a relationship like your parents,
Yep.
you did eventually find yourself in one.
Yep.
Why is this cycle so common?
Sometimes people will be like, how did you end up in something of similar quality? And I kind of struggle with that a little bit myself. I mean, the partner that I chose, I guess, at that time I felt like was the opposite to my father.
So you were actively thinking, I'm looking for the opposite partner and I found him and that's often how these relationships can start off.
Yeah, it felt very different actually in the beginning. Really different cultural background, really different values, lots of really, really big differences. But over time, the familiar kind of power and controlling behaviour really started to creep in. But even then, not to make any excuses, the violence I experienced in that relationship was nothing like the violence that I experienced by my dad. It was still kind of some weird step up. Like it wasn't as bad.
So then did you think, oh, well, it's not that bad. It's not the same as my dad. This is better.
Yeah. And I think that was part of the mind game of it all. Like I just had such a negative childhood experience of violence, like in my own home, but even in my community, a lot of families, like I didn't really have... There weren't many examples of violent-free homes in the community that I grew up in.
So it was very normalised in many
Very
ways.
normalised. And I remember even thinking, like, domestic violence isn't this because the women I knew in my community that I grew up in fought back. They'd throw things or they'd resist or they'd yell and scream. And I had this kind of, as a child, image of a domestic violence victim kind of innocently cowering in a corner, never saying anything back, just being really scared.
Did your mum ever fight back?
Yeah, she did at different times. Yeah. So, I mean, this is part of why I really kind of encourage us to talk about the complexity of these experiences and not simply present it as kind of angels and devils, because that doesn't always reflect the reality that people are experiencing. Of course, we never want to blame victims for what they're experiencing. But, people even who are experiencing the worst violence do resist in different ways, and sometimes that might be yelling or screaming, or sometimes that is throwing something or just trying to survive and navigate these experiences.
And show strength. I mean, power is being shown to them in such a physical way, and not always a physical way. Sometimes it's through coercive control.
Yes.
So, of course, a victim wants to try and fight and match that power sometimes.
I mean, I think just trauma response when you're feeling under attack, there's all different ways that you're trying to resist and navigate those experiences. And in our work at WAGEC, sometimes we see the misidentification of victims as perpetrators because, police walk in and the women are resisting. But we've got to look at that full story and the broader context around those individual experiences to really understand the full complexity of the stories.
We'll be right back with more from Nicole Yade.
Yeah.
So you're in this situation, you're about 23 or 24 and you had a young baby.
Yeah.
A young baby girl.
Mm-hmm.
You're in this situation which you felt was better than what you'd grown up with, but you obviously realised that this was not safe.
Yep.
What was that process like? Because I know that you did try and leave countless times. So tell me about trying to leave and not being able to leave.
For me, in that relationship, the violence really started when I got pregnant, which again is really common, unfortunately.
And women are so vulnerable when they're carrying a baby.
Absolutely. And it was terrifying because I thought, oh my God, I'm pregnant. I'm about to have to stop working. I'm reliant on this person. I didn't have like a safe home base to go back to, so that I felt really isolated and really alone. And that was additionally kind of scary. I've lost count. Honestly, I couldn't tell you, hand on heart, I couldn't tell you the amount of times that I was back and forth. Part of that was because I would leave and then he would beg me to come back, and at different times he would say, I'll kill myself if you leave.
There's that manipulation, and I'm sure that glimmer of, okay, he's sorry now, maybe it'll be better.
Absolutely. Some of the most romantic moments in my life happened in that period, like he would, say, I love you, you're the only one for me. I promise to, stop drinking. I promise to go to counselling. No one loves you like I do.
You've also got a child together and you want to keep that family together. You want it to work.
Yeah, I had a fantasy, I guess, about, how I would raise my daughter and how my daughter's life would be different to the kind of family life that I had growing up. That kind of fantasy had been, 24 years in the making around how I wanted it to be so different when I had kids. And that took a while to kind of let go of as well. It's like the thud of reality not being what you'd really hope for, and the grief, the real grief around that.
That must have been like so, I imagine, despair, knowing you have a baby and like just actually accepting, no, I am in a position where I'm in a relationship where there's domestic violence.
Yep.
This is reality.
Yeah.
I need to get out.
I mean, I'd love to say that the final time I left, I kind of left, really proud and making a really clear decision and walking out the door with my head held high. But it wasn't like that at all. And it's not like that for a lot of people, sadly. The last time I left, I was dragged. I was dragged out of the house by my hair. I was in like a simple kind of nightie. I didn't have any underwear on. I didn't have shoes. I didn't have my wallet or ID. And I was, dragged out of the house. The door was slammed. My baby daughter was inside. And I couldn't get back in the house. So I started to walk probably about 2 or 3 kilometres to the nearest police station. And that was a big decision for me because In the community I grew up in, you didn't really go to the police about these issues. There was a big stigma around that for me. But what had shifted for me there was just like I was so scared that something might happen to my little girl. So kind of in this state, just in a nightie, no shoes, black and blue, started walking a couple of kilometres to the local police station just to try and get my daughter back. That was my real drive. And I remember walking into the police station and literally, probably 6 or 7 kind of police running towards me and going, "Oh my God, you're bleeding." And I hadn't even realised, like I was concussed, I was bleeding. I remember kind of just like going, "Oh my God, I'm bleeding." And them saying like, "We're going to call the ambulance." And I was like, no. I mean, I would have been their most difficult customer that day, I think, because I was kind of hysterical and just, screaming and scared and just insisting that we go back to the house and get my daughter. I was just like, my daughter, please. Like, you've got to help me get my daughter. Because he had made really serious threats about hurting her if I ever left. And it was part of the reason that I also kept going back. So I was terrified that he might hurt her. And the police were like, "Well, you really need to go to the hospital, you're not okay." And I was just like, "No, I refuse. I'm not going to the hospital. Get me my baby." So they took a statement from me pretty quickly. And then we went back to the house where we were staying.
So you went back to the house? With
the police. Yeah, the police escorted me back to the place to try and get her. And she wasn't there and he wasn't there.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So there was a good day or so where I was just completely terrified. I didn't know if she was alive. And yeah, that was the final time I left.
How did the police finally find your daughter?
So it's a bit of a long story, but what ended up happening is, we got into the house somehow. I can't even remember how. And the police were like, "Where is he?" And I was like, "I have no idea." And then they said to me, "Look, what you need to do is call him and just tell him you're sorry.
Yeah.
And we'll wait outside. And then when he comes, we'll grab the baby and we're going to arrest him." I was like, okay, I can do this. I was scared, but mostly scared for my daughter, to be honest. So I remember calling him and kind of going, "I'm so sorry. I know I'm silly. I promise I'm going to do what you ask me now, and I've come home and I'll make it up to you," and like just crazy kind of talk. And he was yelling at me and he was like, "All right, I'm coming." And the police were like, "Okay, so you wait inside the house. When he comes in, we'll grab him."
Were they inside the house?
No, they were outside, and there were probably I think there were like 4 or 5 police cars, like parked in my neighbour's driveway and in the street, which again, the stigma of all this, like everybody in the street knew. There was a lot of shame for me around all of that. And then he pulled into the street, got out of the car, came inside, but he didn't bring my daughter. And so I hadn't thought of that scenario, and the police hadn't thought of that scenario as well. So no one really knew what to do.
And she was 5 or 6 months old.
Little.
She was a baby.
Yeah, really, really little. So I was kind of standing inside and he came in. I was like, where's like my daughter? And he wouldn't tell me. And I was like, in my head, standing there thinking like, where are the police now? Like, what's going to happen, you know? And he was like, you want your daughter, you've got to come with me. I was like, okay. So then we left the house, got in the car. He started driving the car. And then, because I wasn't sure what to do, I was like,
And also,
what are the police doing?
Are the police going to
like,
stop
yeah,
you getting in a car?
It was very confusing. And, you know, you've just been really badly assaulted. You're not doing your best thinking. You're by yourself. You know, no one knows really what to do sometimes in these situations. Moving, and then the police put on the lights and he saw the police and he started screaming at me like, you've called the police, and started like he had one hand on the steering wheel and the other hand he was punching me in the head, and I just remember my head hitting the glass on the side of the car, but he wouldn't stop the car while he was kind of doing it, but probably only for a couple of minutes. The police kind of cut him off and took me out of the car and then arrested him.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was a horrible day.
That is a nightmare.
Yeah, it was an awful day. But that was after that I didn't go back.
He was arrested, and where was your beautiful baby girl?
Yeah, it took us a while to find her because he wouldn't tell the police and he was playing around. But eventually we found her at a friend of his place and she was safe, and thank God she was okay.
Do you remember the relief? I cannot imagine the relief when you got your daughter in your arms.
I just remember crying, to be honest. I just remember kind of holding her so tightly and wanting to kind of touch every part of her, like wanting to check that she was okay, and all her little toes are there and all her little fingers, and just wanting to physically see every inch of her to check she was okay, and then just holding her so tightly and never wanting to let go.
Because we know from statistics and the awful stories that we hear about every single week how this story could have gone.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I think from there I was like really cognizant that I felt lucky to have her. I felt like I had a second chance. And I just remember, you know, that night, like looking into her little eyes and just promising her I'd never go back. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is just, you are the most incredible woman. You, to get through that, you're extraordinary.
Oh, thank you, Georgie. But honestly, like, you know, part of why I share my story is because it really isn't that special. You know, like every day at WAGEC we have 200 women and children who stay with us, and we hear stories like this all the time.
This is why hearing your lived experience is so important, because we can hear statistics and they are so shocking and they hit so hard. But the reality of this lived experience and you describing what you went through, it is so harrowing. And
sadly not uncommon, you know, and I think this is the drive for us in the work that we do, you know. No one should have to go through that. No mum, no kids, no family members, you know, no one. But the reality on the ground is these are the kind of stories, and much worse, honestly, that women are living through every day, and we just owe the women we serve, you know, every bit of care and support, because, you know, the strength that they show and the determination to try and move forward to create a better life for those little babies and those kids, we should honour it. We really should honour it, because the courage of those women is just tremendous. Yeah.
You've spoken about being homeless after you left, and it ties into how hard it is to leave, because that's the reality.
Yep.
Yeah, you can leave, but if you don't have support or anywhere to go, you are homeless.
Yeah.
What did that look like for you?
So for me, that night after that had happened, I really had nowhere else to go. So I ended up back in my parents' house, you know, so I just got my little baby daughter, and, you know, I couldn't get back in the house, and I didn't want to be there or either, because he'd been arrested, but when he was going to get out, you know, I didn't know. I knew that he would go straight back to that house, that he'd be looking for me, that he'd be very angry after the police being involved. So that didn't feel like a safe place to be. And I went to my parents' house, you know, and I was in pretty bad shape, obviously, you know, physical injuries and just emotionally distraught. But I had my daughter with me and was trying to find a safe place to be. And then in the middle of the night, like at about 12 or so, my dad said to me, "Get out."
Wow.
And, you know, I'm not sure why until today, but he asked me to leave that house.
His daughter, who had been physically assaulted, mentally assaulted, with a little baby, he asked to leave.
Yeah, so I had no choice really but to leave, and I had nowhere to go. And I just remember, you know, it was in the middle of the night. I remember it being cold. And I remember kind of standing on the footpath next to the letterbox out the front of my parents' house, just holding my baby girl and crying my eyes out and just going, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. And I just started calling different friends and just, you know, it was the middle of the night, so most of my friends were in bed asleep. They weren't answering the phone.
Not only are you thinking about that, you're also thinking, babies are on bottles or however they're fed at that time. So it's you're on a schedule to make sure your baby girl has milk and...
Yeah, all of that, right? And, you know, we didn't... I had a small bag of things and I had her. That was the most important. And then one friend who used to work shifts, actually, answered the phone, and I just broke down and just said, this is what's happened. And I was still really ashamed of telling anyone.
So no one knew that you were in a relationship with violence?
Look, I hadn't really talked a lot to people about it, but I think a few of my close friends knew. Yeah. But I hadn't given all of the information to kind of protect him in a way, but also I think I just felt so ashamed. And
also the shame and judgment of people saying, you've got to leave, but it's not that simple.
Yes. And I think if I had really told some of my good friends about what was happening, I would have had to be more accountable for not going back as well. And I didn't feel quite ready to make some of those decisions at that time. But yeah, luckily this friend answered the phone and she was just like, where are you? Give me the address. And she drove to me and came and picked me up. We didn't have a car seat or anything like that, but we just kind of sat in the back of her car together, and then I went and slept on her couch that night.
Oh my gosh. Are you still friends with that person?
I am.
She's a keeper.
That's a lifelong friend, absolutely, yeah.
You have been through so much, and I know there's like, we could talk for days and days about that moment to where you are sitting here today as the CEO of this incredible organisation. How did you build your life up again?
Yeah, slowly. You know, I remember, you know, staying with this friend for a little while, kind of couch surfing a bit, really, until I kind of was able to get a little unit, and then moving into that unit, but like literally having nothing, you know, like I don't even remember how I got it, but I had a mattress on the floor, and that was it. Like, I remember by this stage it was about Christmas time, because I'd connected in with someone who had referred me to a counsellor, who, you know, had referred me on to another service. I remember I was in a new area that I didn't know.
Were you scared that he was going to find you?
Absolutely. Like, by this stage, you know, AVO processes had started. I had to go to court around that. I had to go to court for, like, you know, assault charges. That was all starting to happen. Actually, when I left, the violence escalated. And again, that's a really sad but common experience. Like, sometimes I think, you know, the general public think that, oh, why doesn't she just leave? Oh, when she leaves, okay, then it's over, that's good. But more often what we see is when you leave, there's an escalation in the violence, and that certainly was the case for me. When I had AVOs, there were like so many breaches of AVOs.
Because a lot of perpetrators, they don't care.
No.
They're feeling out of control. They don't care about
That's right.
AVOs.
No, that's right. So lots of breaches of AVOs, and yeah, that whole thing is really, really complicated. So it took me quite some time to kind of get back on my feet, and, you know, slowly over the years got back into, as my daughter got a little bit older, started working part-time. You know, I've always worked in trauma, so different roles over the years, and then kind of found my way into working with women and supporting people who have had this experience too.
Well, we're sitting here today, and as you said earlier, every night around 200 women and children stay with your organisation because they're fleeing domestic violence and they have nowhere safe to go.
Yeah.
So for our listeners and people watching who don't know what your organisation does, can you explain what the Women's and Girls Emergency Centre does and the role it plays?
Yeah, absolutely. So every night at WAGEC we have 200 women and children who stay with us, who are fleeing life situations like the one I described. They're coming to us straight from the hospital or from the police, and they've got nowhere safe to go. So, you know, they come in with their kids, and they stay with us, and our service provides them with a person, a good soul, to kind of help them navigate all of the challenges that are ahead of them and help them get into more permanent housing and get things back on track. At WAGEC, we also work in the prevention of violence. So, you know, we don't want to just do that crisis work, even though that crisis response is so very important. We want to kind of work a bit more upstream to make sure people, you know about healthy relationships and know about gender equality. So, they can look for relationships of that quality and spot those red flags.
Because it is hard if you don't have the role models. You talked about the community you grew up in. Domestic violence was very common. So it suddenly becomes so normalised. So there's a big education piece.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things we're trying to talk to women about often is, if he treats you as an equal, that's a green flag. That's what we want, because someone who treats you as an equal will be less likely to dehumanise you and use violence. So, that work is really, really important in the community. And then we also provide services in healing and recovery to help women when they're out of that real crisis phase get back on track, back into employment, back feeling good and strong and themselves.
Which getting back into employment is so hard if you have young children.
Absolutely.
Because then you've got to be able to afford childcare. Who's going to look after your kids? I mean, that's a whole other podcast in terms of caring and the gaps there for women. But it's not simple.
Yeah, and I think these experiences often really undermine your confidence and self-esteem, and so often you've been told you're worthless and you're good for nothing and much worse. So, when you're going for training or employment, all of us find that a bit tough, and you've got to put your brave face on and get out and, sell yourself in those situations. So, the women we serve have got some additional barriers around some of that. So making sure that they've got the right support and care to really build them up and help them with that is really important.
Now, before we get back to today's conversation, I wanted to take a quick moment to say thank you so much for being here. If you've been enjoying, you're going to want to hear this. One of the best ways you can support this podcast is by following us, leaving a rating or review, or just simply sharing an episode with a friend. Every listen, every recommendation, and every review helps us keep bringing you conversations that inform, challenge, and inspire. Now, let's get back to Nicole. So 200 women every night. What are the common characteristics that you see in these women? Obviously, I'm sure there's fear and how would you describe how so many of these women arrive feeling?
I would say often very isolated and very confused. But they come from every walk of life, from every profession, from every socioeconomic background, from every suburb. But what they've got in common is, an experience of violence that's really shattered their life, and their relationships. It's isolated them. It's fractured relationships often with their children. But also what I see in those women is this tremendous courage and this kind of, sometimes it can be a tiny little hope, but no one walks into a refuge thinking it can't be different. When you walk in, you're looking for it to change. And what we want to do is kind of keep igniting that spark and help it to grow. And really help people understand the options they have so they don't feel so alone.
And they have no doubt all such a journey to actually get to the refuge.
Oh, yeah.
They would have tried to leave so many times. They are at their lowest point. I have to get out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes I say if everyone who came in to stay with us at Refuge had simply left the relationship, that'd still be a tough job, don't get me wrong, but our job would probably be a little bit easier. But the truth is, the women that we have who stay with us are still often 1 foot in and 1 foot out. And they're still trying to work out what to do because they're still getting bombarded with those messages like, I'll stop drinking, or I promise I'll be good, or please.
I love you, I need you.
Yeah, please come home. One of the hardest things we see in our work is when, the mums are like, no, I've got to go. I want a new life. I don't want to be in this relationship anymore. But the kids might have different ideas and different thoughts and feelings that they're trying to process depending on their age. And, the mums we work with are under enormous pressure when their kids are saying, Mum, take me home. I don't want to be here. I hate it here. I want to be at my old school with my old friends, with my favourite teacher. I want my bike. I want my toys. I want my own bed, And it's a very strong mum who can kind of withstand that pressure from their kids. I mean, sometimes it's different, Sometimes the kids are angry with their mum because she didn't leave sooner. But all of the kids have got their own big feelings and experiences around this, and it's a lot for any one person to navigate. You can't do it by yourself.
It's so confusing. How I just can't even begin to imagine how you make a decision.
Yeah, it's tough. So, one of the things we find is when people come into the refuge, just even getting some good food in their belly and some rest will help, because, often we're saying you don't have to decide right now. These are really big decisions. But what might be good is to get a bit of sleep. It sounds like you haven't had any good rest for a little while. And once you get a little bit more rest, you might be able to make, these really big, hard decisions with a bit more of a clear head. Some of these basic things make a big difference.
Sleep and food, they need to start from a base where they physically feel rested. And
Absolutely, because even those basic things often haven't been there for a long time.
What are some of the stories that have stayed with you? Because there is so much trauma that you see every single day.
Yeah.
What are some of the stories that just give you hope that we are changing lives and there can be a different story for these women?
Yeah, so many, honestly.
That's so amazing to hear. I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah, it really is. A hard day at WAGEC is a really tough day. You see the real impacts that violence has and the devastating impacts that it has on women and children. But a good day is extraordinary. It's pretty special. You see someone who's done the work, who's been so courageous, who's made really hard, tough decisions, who's back on track and feeling optimistic and positive about the future. There's one family that will always kind of stay with me, and Mum came in, and when she came in with two little boys. I think they were about 7 and 5, and when the little boys came in, they weren't even speaking. They were so traumatized. If any person, even us who are really experienced in working with trauma and know how to gently approach kids, were kind of really gently, carefully going up to them. They would just hit or kick or spit at us. But then even just a couple of weeks of being in a safe place with really consistent care and support, their mum starting to be a bit more rested and feel a little better, all of a sudden I had a little head poking in my office door Nick, little wave and run away. I'm like, they're speaking again. Eventually, I've got balloons in my office. I'm known for giving balloons. So, give a balloon and, I'd get a high five. And, within a couple of months, those little boys were smiling and playing and being kids again.
Wow.
And no doubt they had a really long road ahead of them to really recover from the horrendous things they saw and experienced.
Do you ever think you recover, or is it because you would know this firsthand? Do you recover, or do you just get to a place where you have processed the trauma?
Yeah.
How does that unfold?
I mean, for me, healing is lifelong work. Yeah, like I think, I'm doing okay now and, feeling good in life. But every now and then something will set me back too. And sometimes it's involuntary, like I'll have a memory that I had kind of forgotten or I didn't know I had even, come up for me. And that can happen really randomly, and that still happens to me.
I know sometimes with motherhood, people who've experienced trauma, depending on what age their child is, it does trigger memories of when they were that age.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's really true as well. So those things come up, but I think now I know what to do and what I need to do to kind of just be kind to myself and keep going. But yeah, I think these experiences, we're talking about really complex trauma, not one-off incidents, although they can be awful too for people. When you've experienced complex trauma, years and years of traumatic things happening, I think it's more about learning to live with it and constantly doing that work to take care of yourself and heal over time. I'm not sure you ever get to a place where it's just like done now.
I hope that you do take care of yourself because you take care of a lot of people. You are an incredible giver. I hope that you also nurture yourself.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I need a reminder too, like the next person, but I think that's one of the great things about working in a team as well. We are such a great team at WAGEC and we take care of each other too.
And I imagine it is incredibly rewarding when you have a little boy peek into your office who, only weeks before was not talking. Like that must just fill your soul.
Yeah, it can be different. Like I think sometimes the public discourse about these issues, I kind of can get a bit disheartened about because it almost feels like we've given up. It's like, oh, there's always going to be domestic violence. Oh, the sector's always going to be asking for more money. Oh, it's just going to be how it is, and it doesn't have to be this way. Like we can change these issues. The example of the women who pull themselves through these experiences should be the example and the hope that we follow.
It does definitely feel like domestic violence is being talked about more than ever, but we know that there is so much work to do. And earlier this year, our PM, Anthony Albanese, said that the government was throwing everything at domestic family violence, which we've heard before, and words are words, they're not actions. You've said that from the front line, that just doesn't reflect the reality.
Yeah.
So what is the reality?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so confused by that statement. I mean, we're not throwing everything. Every time we have a vacant room at WAGEC, our team have the impossible decisions to make about who gets that room tonight. And the simple fact of the matter is that there's never enough rooms for the number of women and children who need them.
That's just not good enough at all.
Absolutely.
If we're going to solve this problem, it's not good enough.
Yeah, if we're going to say, like, why doesn't she leave? She's got to have a real option to leave. And, if we're deciding with that one vacant room between 3, 4, sometimes 5 families about who gets that room tonight, tell me again there's a real option for people?
If we had men fleeing homes because women were being violent,
yeah,
this would be completely different.
It feels that way, doesn't it? I mean, it's just like, is this a national crisis or not? Like, if it is, act like it. If we work on and solve these issues and do the work that's required, it impacts so many other things. you know. Like, we're talking about 1 in 4 women in Australia. We're talking about those kids at school, their outcomes in their classes. You know, we're talking about women not being able to go to work. Like, there's so many pieces that this touches on. And I just would like to see us really, really, truly prioritise it. Not just in words, but in action. You know, my heart sinks every time we hear of another murdered woman who makes the news. And they don't all make the news, right? Mm. But when, you know, we hear about that absolutely tragic and devastating murder of a whole person, you know, we talk about it for a couple of days and then it's gone.
So I'm so grateful for women like Sherelle Moody, who she makes...
So inspiring.
She's so inspiring, and she documents these women and children who are murdered every single week, and she talks loud, and I wish there was a million Sherelle Moody's and a million Nicole Yades as well.
You're a sweetheart. But yeah, I mean, I think these are real people's lives, you know. This is a devastating thing that's happened not just to one woman and her parents and her children. It's our whole community, you know. It's not good enough. We've really got to take it seriously and do better. And where are those men and their voices in this debate? Like, we need more of them to be saying loudly, this is not okay.
That's what frustrates me.
Calling out their mates.
So much. Why, like, if women were running around hurting men, I would be ashamed to be a woman, and I would be screaming, we have a serious problem on our hands, we need to fix this. And I get so frustrated by how many men don't speak up and acknowledge that this is it's their problem as well. Why are we the ones that are screaming so loudly?
Absolutely. We need everyone. We need everyone, and we need us all to come together and say, no, it's not okay. And I think if more of us did that, maybe we could change some of the cultural norms around it as well.
Now, there's a walk in September.
There is.
That I want everyone listening.
That's amazing.
Who's in Sydney to come to.
Yes, down at Centennial Park on September the 13th. Help us raise $1 million to keep these services going so we can, you know, help even more women and children.
We can do that. $1 million, we can.
Oh, I hope so. It would be amazing, and it would have such a massive impact. So
September 13 at Centennial Park.
Yes.
And do they go to the website?
Absolutely.
Which we'll link in the show notes.
So walkforwagec.org.au. Come register. Come and join us to say, you know, no to violence and really help more women and children have a safe future. You
are now remarried.
Yes.
You have found love. Your beautiful daughter is not 32. That would be a very young mother. 23?
She is.
23.
Yes. Yep, you're right.
Life looks so different for you now. Yeah. How did you learn to trust again and feel safe? Because I imagine feeling safe was very like, what's happening?
Yes, I'm laughing because my husband might have his own view on that. But I think it took time. You know, it took time and trust and knowing that there are good people still in the world.
And there are so many great people. I mean, it must be to feel loved and safe, which is everything that you deserve.
I'm so lucky now. I did it the hard way, but we got there in the end. And, you know, to see my daughter, that baby girl that I talked to you about, you know, she's blossoming and she certainly has a take no shit kind of attitude, and she's a cycle breaker for sure. And, you know, together we've had 2 boys, and I'm really blessed to have an older stepdaughter as well. And, you know, there's hopefulness in this next generation. They want healthy relationships. They know what it's going to take, and seeing them stand up for what's right gives me so much hope.
Is it looking at your daughter, she is the age that you were when you were in one of the darkest, if not probably the darkest periods of your life.
Mm-hmm.
She must feel like a baby.
Mm-hmm.
Like 23, it's still so young.
Absolutely.
Can you believe that you went through what you went through at her age?
No, I really can't. I look at her now and, she's off travelling the world at the moment, having an amazing time, and she's doing that for herself, but she's doing it for both of us, because I think, when I was that age, I wasn't able to do those things, and there's a lot of healing in that. But yeah, I look back now and I just think I was an absolute baby trying to navigate all this and trying to navigate it by myself. And
with a baby. You're a baby with a baby.
Yeah.
She must just think you are the most incredibly strong, amazing mum.
She keeps it real with me. Yeah, she keeps me pretty grounded. But yeah, no, I adore her, and she's the absolute best. And yeah, we're so lucky now to just have a family that stand together against violence. And yeah, it's going to be great to just see, without those experiences in her life and in my kids' lives, what else becomes possible for them. And that's the possibility that we want for everyone right across the community. A life with violence, even though we can recover from these experiences and we keep healing, it does hold us back in so many ways. But, we want everyone to be able to meet their full potential in life and enjoy life and experience happiness and joy and, yeah, just grow and learn. And
have a safe home.
Absolutely.
If I think about my own two girls, everything I do, I it's like little things like, here's a bunny rabbit, like trying to shape this childhood for them, which is joyous and full of love and where they feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so glad now that you have a family where you have this beautiful safe home.
Yes.
Despite the fact that you didn't grow up with that.
Yeah, that safety's got to be the foundation, right? Like, that's the springboard to all the other good stuff. So, yeah, if we can get more safe homes for everyone, we'll be doing well.
What is one thing that you wish Australia understood more about domestic violence?
That it could be anyone. Yeah, I think it could be anyone, and I think one of the disturbing bits for me sometimes is like this lack of belief in women. Like sometimes, in the media you'll see, oh, she's lying, or it's just that one always really throws me. I think we've got to believe survivors. We've got to believe the testimony of women. Sometimes the stories, I've been doing this work for a long time, I've got a lived experience myself, and sometimes the stories I hear even are just like deeply shocking and almost unbelievable, and I believe them, but they're extraordinary, So I understand that sometimes people feel a bit like, really? Did this happen? But yes, it did. And
to anyone. We often think this is only based on your economic background, or it happens, and it's not always through like coercive control. You can't see that.
Absolutely. But we've got to believe survivors, and it starts from taking it seriously and believing women and standing with them for change. Yeah.
Nicole, my last question is, the name of this podcast is You're Going to Want to Hear This.
Yes.
I've just asked you for a message of what you want Australians to hear, but what's one message that you want our listeners to hear? And it might be around the work of your incredible organisation.
Change is possible. Change is possible. We don't have to accept domestic violence as this kind of thing in our community that we don't know how to solve. We can solve it if we all stand together, the right investment is there, this is an issue that we can really make progress on and can change. No one deserves to live with violence. Safe futures for everyone is actually possible. And let's not give up. Don't give up on these issues. Vote on these issues. Care about them enough to really stand with us and make the change we want to see.
Nicole, thank you so much.
Thank you, Georgie, always. Yeah.
Wow, I know that I am not the only one who has tears in their eyes. If there is one thing I hope you take away from today's conversation, it's this. Leaving an abusive relationship is never as simple as walking out the door. As Nicole reminded us, domestic violence doesn't always begin with bruises. It often starts with control, isolation, fear, and financial dependence long before physical violence ever occurs. And that's exactly why asking, why doesn't she leave, is the wrong question. The better question is, how can we make it safer for her to leave? Nicole's story is extraordinary, and not because she survived, but because she has transformed unimaginable trauma into a life dedicated to helping other women and children find safety, dignity, and hope. Every single day she proves that while your past may shape you, it does not have to define you. If today's conversation has brought up anything for you, or if you or someone you know is experiencing domestic or family violence, please know that support is available. You can call 1-800-RESPECT or 1-800-737-732. You do not have to face it alone. Thank you so much for listening. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone you love. These conversations matter so much, and the more we talk about them, the more we can challenge the stigma, the myths, and the silence that allows abuse to continue. For more stories of style and substance from Marie Claire, make sure to follow You're Gonna Want to Hear This on your favourite podcast app. And if you prefer to watch in high def, you can subscribe to Marie Claire's YouTube channel. That way you will never miss an episode. I'll see you next time on You're Gonna Want to Hear This.